also use a tool of accommodations to ensure inclusion of people with disabilities. Accommodations are a means of removing or reducing barriers that prevent people with disabilities from participating fully. We have a duty to accommodate the needs of our participants to the point of undue hardship, which means that up until the point where doing so might lead to a safeguarding risk, might cause harm to someone, or might jeopardize our project outcomes. So there are some common myths about accommodations. The idea that if someone requires accommodations, maybe they can't handle this program or they're not right for this program. There's the idea that if we provide accommodations to some people, this could provide an unfair advantage. And also that some people would abuse and take advantage of accommodations. And so it's important to note that accommodations are a really key mechanism for us to ensure that we are considering what each individual needs in order to participate. So 3 key principles are respect for dignity. People with disabilities have the right to participate and receive support. Human dignity is pretty complex. It involves self-worth, physical and psychological integrity. So accommodations that don't respect someone's dignity would be things that marginalize, stigmatize, or devalue them. This might include considerations for how we provide that accommodation or how we determine what is needed in that process. And so we need to be careful how we're approaching this, how we're discussing accommodations. The second principle is individualization. The idea here is that people with disabilities are very unique individuals. They all have different needs and different situations. It's important, therefore, that these accommodations are considered individually for each person because their needs are different. This also means that blanket approaches that use big generalizations won't be appropriate. So we can't assume all people who have hearing impairments are going to be fine if they just sit closer to the facilitator, as an example. The third principle is integration and full participation. So whenever possible, we want to make sure the accommodations allow people with disabilities to engage in the learning environment in the same way as their non-disabled peers and promote their full participation in those things. We should never aim for accommodations to separate the people who use them from the people who don't. And it's also important we do a bit of reflection on what might stop someone from voicing a need for accommodation, because we already talked about how there's fear and stigma around disability. There's cultural understandings of disability that might be different. There's sometimes a new condition or a disability might present itself, and so that person might be apprehensive to voice another need. And they might have experienced discrimination or lack of support in the past, and so might be expecting to face the same kinds of treatment. So it's important to proactively inform people of what's available, offer them help, check in with them, and just to note that in doing this kind of check-in and being proactive to be inclusive, we don't mean inquire into the very nature of their disability. That is for them to identify to us at their discretion. But it's more about opening up the space, creating a safe space so that someone feels like they can come and voice what they need. Access, meaningful engagement, respect, and ensure that they're deriving benefits. So that brings us to our final image, which is this image of justice here. Justice is all about, especially gender justice, is all about addressing the systemic barriers we create and we reinforce in our programs and communities. So, importantly, gender justice and what we call gender transformative programs and approaches center the diverse needs, experiences, and leadership of the people most impacted by discrimination and oppression. And what this does is it helps us achieve both equity, so the fair distribution of resources, access, opportunities, and the end goal of equality, equal outcomes. And so importantly, the image of justice illustrates this really well. What we see here is if we had started at the beginning by integrating everyone's perspectives, everyone's needs in our design of our project, program, event, we would have noticed that we didn't need to build a wall, because that wall is not going to be experienced equally by each individual. And so we can make specific decisions around design that can allow us to ensure inclusion in a way that doesn't require any additional supports. We've built it in from the very beginning.